Hey everyone, welcome to Mountain Beast Mysteries. In today's video, I have a couple really interesting Bigfoot encounters to share, both of them by hunters. So we'll get into that right away, but first I just wanted to say that if you haven't watched Expedition Sasquatch 4, I'd highly recommend going and checking that out. Had a really good time shooting that, and I'm looking forward to filming the 5th film in that series and sharing it with you guys here on YouTube. So like I said, if you haven't checked it out, go back and have a look at that, and you can share it wherever you want, and get that film out there as much as possible. But the hunting encounters today that I'm going to share both happened in the state of Idaho, and they're actually quite incredible, especially this first one here that I'm about to share, so we'll get into it right now. Several friends and myself were camping near Elk Valley with our dads at our annual bow camp. One morning we started our hunt at the top of a thick area of timber. I had never been in this area before, but my instructions were to make my way through the forest and walk straight downhill. After a while, I was expected to break out into a clearing where here will be a saddle with a few rocky knolls which would drain into some ponds at the bottom. This entire area is known as the Bloody Bucket. For what reason, I wasn't sure and I didn't ask. The hunt was planned out that my friends and I would walk slowly down through this area, hoping to scare out a mule deer or a bull elk, and having the big game cross the path of another hunter in our party. We were spread out so far apart that we couldn't see or hear each other. As I made my way down into the opening, everything was just as was described to me. I could see where I needed to end up and meet, even though it was a ways away. I came out right in the middle of the opening and walked down to a rocky area, stopped to take a breather, and looked around. All of a sudden, down to my left, about 100 yards away, I saw what appeared to be 3 dark brown beings walking down a trail near the trees as if they were in a hurry. They were in order of height, with the tallest leading the way, then a slightly smaller one followed by the smallest one of the 3, which was trying hard to keep up with the other 2. As I took a deep breath to gather myself, to see if what I was experiencing was what I thought it was, the leader turned around and waved his or her arm in a manner as if to tell the smallest one to hurry up. They continued to speed walk into the timber and faded away. I was very shocked, nervous, and somewhat frightened. My heart was pounding, and I just sat there in amazement for about 15 minutes. I didn't go down to see if I could see any sign of what I just experienced. I just went down to the bottom like I was supposed to and didn't mention a word of it to anyone. I didn't think anyone would believe me in any way. A few years went by and I met up with one of my friends that I was hunting with on that day. I was relieved when he told me, "Do you remember that year when we hunted the Bloody Bucket in Elk Valley?" Well, I've got something to tell you. He went on to describe to a T what I saw that day. It turns out that he was just a little ahead of me and to my right, in the trees about 75 yards. Neither one of us knew that we were so close to each other and had witnessed the same thing. It would have been nice to have had somebody back me up. Ever since then, I've told a few more people. I also heard that the same summer there had been a sighting near Montpelier Reservoir, which is a few miles west of Elk Valley. It's ironic that the only time I would probably experience something like that, I didn't have a camera, a camcorder, or was too stunned to go check out the area and tell someone about it. No sounds were heard, and there's no real proof that this happened, just my own word. I remember it like it was yesterday. So that's a really cool Bigfoot encounter. 3 creatures witnessed at once by 2 different people. And the interesting thing is that these 2 guys, these 2 hunters, didn't know that, each one of them had actually saw the same thing until years later. Very interesting. But the cool thing about encounters like this is that when you hear how the Bigfoot creatures are described, they're behaving in a way that is very human-like. It's not a very animalistic behavior that they're displaying. You have the tallest one, which I'm assuming is probably the oldest, more experienced one, leading the way, and he's motioning the smallest one to hurry up, to come along, and they're hurrying to get out of the view of these hunters. They know there's an open area, and they obviously, were alerted to the presence of these hunters, and they quickly try and make their way into an area where they can't be seen. It really comes off as like a behavior that a human would do, motioning with your arm to get the other ones to move along a little faster. Very, very cool report. Let's get into the second report here. This one's not as interesting, but it's still a really good report. This happened in Clearwater County, Idaho, back in 1995. When we arrived to our camp from an early spotlighting mission for game, we were breaking down for dinner. There was a sound which sounded like a mule and a wailing scream. This occurred once, but only lasted for about 15 seconds. It is hard to describe these sounds in print, but whoever I tell my story to, I always get goosebumps. We had a 1.5 million candle power spotlight and could not see too far into the bush because it was so dense. But we saw something about 7 to 8 feet in height. A hairy body, but with an open face with not so much hair on it. Bigger eyes than normal, even though we can only see the reflection of the eyes. They reflected back to us as blue-green to a slight red tint. The creature only remained in the light for a few seconds and covered his eyes when the light was directly shined on it. His hands were big, with the palms hairless. The creature was supporting itself or bracing itself between two trees about 6 inches in diameter. His hands clearly wrapped around the trees. We both couldn't believe our eyes and grabbed our rifles after it shambled off into the woods. The whole night we could hear something walking around our campsite with ease. I was kind of scared, but I had sufficient firepower to kill anything in those woods. We did build a bigger fire, and it took us many hours to go to bed that night. The next day I went up to look for anything unusual and noticed freshly twisted limbs on white fir trees about 5 to 8.5 feet tall. The pitch was just barely coming out, so it was only a few hours old. These twistings were about 50 to 200 yards from our campsite all around us. It was too dry for any quality tracks. I've been in the woods for a good part of my life, and I never thought this could happen to me or ever happen again. I'm still scared of that area to this day, but I want to return to search for more evidence of Bigfoot. I believe now. Very interesting report, mostly because he describes finding twisted limbs on these trees around the camp, all around the camp. And, John Bindernagel used to talk a lot about branch twisting. You have the stories you hear of tree breaks, and, that really could be anything. And there's trees that break due to, many different circumstances like snow load and just environmental factors. But when you have the limbs of trees and little saplings that are twisted, that's a very strange thing to come across. And, this directly correlates in this story with a creature that had been seen through the spotlight next to their camp. So I don't think that is a coincidence. They see this creature. Before they saw it, they heard wailing screams. And, they actually find these twisted trees. So all of these things add up to a very incredible Bigfoot encounter. So many different elements to the story. They hear the audio, they hear the vocalizations, they see the creature itself, and they hear it walking around the camp throughout the night. They find trace evidence. He says the ground is too dry for it to make any impressions in the dirt to leave any footprints, but it does leave these twisted limbs, which is excellent. This is back in 1995, so you wouldn't really expect everyone to have a camera like they do nowadays. I'm sure if this happened nowadays, you'd have a cell phone, you'd be able to take pictures of these twisted tree limbs. But back then, the odds are that, people had a camera were much lower, and it would have been a film camera. So, but this is the thing, like a lot of times you'll hear hunters say that, oh, I've been back in the bush hunting for years and I've never seen anything that could lead me to believe that Bigfoot is real. You hear that a lot, but then there's also a lot of hunters who have had experiences like this. Just because you spend a lot of time out in the bush hunting doesn't mean you're going to see a Bigfoot. It's completely up to them usually if you're going to see them, up to them making a mistake that you're going to see them. It just depends what the circumstances are. This seemed like a curious creature in this last story. Maybe it wanted them to get the heck out of that area. Maybe that's why it was screaming at first, but some people see them and some people don't, and the majority of people don't. But there are lots of people who do see these creatures, lots of hunters that do see them. Anyways, that's really all I have for today's video. I just wanted to share these reports. I thought they were very interesting, and I thought they were like really great encounters where, you know, the creatures are actually seen. The first one involves a sighting of multiple creatures by 2 different witnesses, and the second one involves a sighting of the creature along with some great trace evidence left behind. That's all I have for today's video. We'll see you next time on Mountain Beast Mysteries.